Hello, I'm Ray Bradshaw and this is a Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Monday the 29th of December. And today, we're giving you the 2025 debrief.
And your message to the fans after today, they want results?
I think anything I say will help that right now.
We had a good performance, but we didn't score. So this is the reality regarding.
Where's Scottish football now? We reflect on the big stories of the year. Who is up and who is down as we say goodbye to 2025.
I'm always hearing about the top of the league only because other teams not being as good as they normally are, but actually points tally is actually where a team at top of the league normally is in the round.
Where on earth are we heading? What will be shocking us in 2026? We'll be getting our crystal balls out to see where the big stories lie.
The biggest one that helps you throughout the season is winning games of football. Building that kind of positive momentum. We're falling on the wrong side of that of late, and that's difficult.
We'll guide you through the tangled web of Scottish football 2025.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Yes, hello and welcome to the podcast today. We're kind of in that middle bit. No one knows what day of the week it is. No one knows the date. We've got two brilliant guests to chat through our yearly roundup. First up, we get Craig Telfer, a View from the Terrace presenter. Craig, how's this month been for you? An enjoyable time?
It's been a very physically demanding time, and by physically demanding I just mean the amount that I have put into my body in terms of food and drink. I am bloated yet content. So I'm in a good place for the time being, but come January, that's when we're going to get back on the horse.
Bloated but content should be the autobiography title for Stevie Fulton. Like, that feels what that should be right there. We're also joined by Stephen McGowan, Herald football writer at large. Stephen, for you, because it feels like there's not as much football between Christmas and New Year this year without winter breaks and such like that. How's this time of year for you? Are you able to relax at all?
Well, it's funny you should say that. Due to a slight change of circumstances, it's the first time in 30 years I've taken a holiday over Christmas and New Year. First time in 30 years, so I'm quite enjoying it, I have to say. It's quite good. I think Christmas football is overrated. Having said that, now that we're kind of getting to that point where we've been confined with family for quite a long time, then a wee game wouldn't be the worst thing in the world at the moment. So, mixed feelings.
And obviously we're coming up to 1st of January, transfer window opens. Is your phone active? Are you hearing some gossip? What are you hearing?
Funny enough, it started to ping. I've been slightly relieved. We're taking some time off that Wilfred Nancy has managed to stop the hemorrhaging, because that was my biggest concern. The first day that Celtic manager would be sacked, and there would be messages coming from her absolutely everywhere. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a big January for Celtic, big January for Rangers, big January for every team. And a really notoriously difficult window, isn't it? We keep hearing this from people, and it's true, because teams don't really want to sell their best players in this window. And if you are some of the struggling big teams like Celtic or Rangers who've really got a point to prove, you need good signings, and teams are not going to want to sell them.
Yeah, let's get into it. Right, first up, Craig Telfer, you've done a lot of stuff over the years. Here's a nice easy question for you. Are Hearts going to win the league?
No, I don't think so. I think that every time Hearts have had a setback, that question always comes round: are Hearts going to win the league? Is this the bubble bursting? But I think what we saw from that game against Hibernian on Saturday was just a sort of performance where up until the late rally, nothing really seemed to work for them. I thought Hibs were a lot quicker to them. Hibs won a lot of their first balls, won a lot of the second balls. A lot of the goals that Hearts lost were quite preventable, both coming down their right-hand side in the first half and then Kieran Bowie pouncing on a mistake to score from the second. And I think that in the second half, Derek McInnes changing shape and bringing Harry Milne on, playing him as a right winger, it just didn't work. And I just feel like, and I don't know if it's because I'm that age where in my entire lifetime the only two teams that have won the Scottish top flight have been Rangers and Celtic, that I am just conditioned to thinking that no one else can do it. But I just think that Rangers, Danny Rowe's proven that he's a good manager. They'll be able to strengthen in January. Wilfred Nancy, whether or not you want to give him 15, 20 million pounds to go and spend on players is another story, but they've got the resources that they can go and strengthen and just kick on. And it just feels like Hearts fans should just enjoy what we've seen over the first half of the season and just see what happens over the second half. But I think it's probably Celtic or Rangers. Hearts might finish third, actually.
It's funny you should say that, Craig, because, well, hang on a minute, because I was actually thinking back, I am old enough to remember a different era. Early 80s, so the infamous New Firm years. And I remember 1985-86, and it was December, end of December. Hearts went to Ibrox, they won 1-0, Alex McDonald's team. And that night, it was a snowbound pitch, well, not snowbound, but icebound pitch. And Alex McDonald went in that night after a 2-0 win, and he said to the team, this is going to be our year. We're going to win the league. And Hearts were top of the league going into 1986, and Scotland were going to a World Cup. And actually, you look at this and you think, this is potentially the most exciting year for Scottish football in 40 years. Mm-hmm. The downside to that is we all know how that Hearts campaign ended. So, on one hand, it's funny because I saw Ely Barber yesterday asking Craig Levine about it. And he said, oh, thanks for reminding me of that. And that's the problem. It's the weight of history against Hearts, isn't it? It's not just the fact that Celtic and Rangers have won the league for 40 years. It's their own history. It's their own kind of mental baggage they're fighting against, and whether they know how to be winners when the heat is really on.
Stephen, a simple yes or no. Do you think they'll win the league, Hearts? Yes or no?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Right, you've mentioned other teams. Craig, alone, you mentioned Celtic, Rangers, Hibs there. Let's do Celtic first. They've had 3 managers in a season, more than they've had strikers. Them being on chaos doesn't seem on anyone's bingo card. Craig, if we're doing the year roundup, Wilfred Nancy, do you see him lasting the season?
Oh, Jings, that's a really good question. I think he's certainly bought himself a lot of time with the wins over Aberdeen and Livingston at the weekend there, because prior to that, it did look very dicey. I don't think you could have had possibly a worse start than that. This Celtic team, they remind me a lot of Rangers under Barry Ferguson last season, where they are quite simply the most watchable side in Scotland at the moment. And what I mean by that is you just can't take your eyes off them. Something silly might happen. They're capable of playing this really florid, really expansive kind of football where it looks like everything's all clicked into place. And then they can concede 2 outstanding goals to Christian Montano like they did yesterday. So I don't think there's any other team that have got the capacity for such a high and as low ceiling Celtic do under Nancy. And it's just, I think he really needs to get the players on side. It's a big January coming up. If he can ship out some of the duds, recruit some of his own players, they're a team that are deficient in a number of areas, particularly up front, as you've alluded to. But it's been a great laugh so far.
It really has. It really has. Stephen, give us an oversight on the two, because obviously you see a lot of stuff behind the scenes. So you've got Celtic, Wilfred Nancy, conflict between the fans and the board. Could that end? Whereas you get Rangers, a tale of upheaval. They seem to have steadied the ship. How do we judge the new owners? Can you give us an oversight in both those teams, please?
I think for both of them, it comes down to the same thing. It comes down to recruitment in January. That will be absolutely critical, because it's been too poor so far, and making that better is absolutely key to the success of both of them. I mean, it's hard to believe at this time last year the 2 managers were Brendan Rodgers and Philippe Clement. Remember him? It's a different world. They've both gone through 3 managers in a year, and we've never seen that. That's unparalleled. Yep. And so many of the problems have been down to signing the wrong players. So, Rangers have gone through a sporting director as well. I think they acknowledge as a club, I think Andrew Kavanagh acknowledges that they've got far too much wrong. They've made too many bad decisions, and they need to reset, they need to go again, and they need to get the house in order. They need to learn fast, because the new owners, that was a big, big story in the year, the 49ers and Andrew Kavanagh, but they made some really poor decisions in the early days. Celtic as well have been making bad decisions as a club. They've been so sure-footed for about 20 years, and suddenly they've lost their touch. They've made a number of bad decisions at the same time. And that was really the only way they could lose all those advantages they had. If they dropped the ball in an epic fashion and allowed others to come towards them. So far, Rangers haven't quite come towards them enough, but Celtic need to get their act together, and I think they really need to. If it has been Paul Tisdale who's been doing their player acquisitions in the last window or so, they need to sideline him in this window, and they need to get it right, because I thought Hearts would win the league. That's only if Celtic and Rangers continue in the same cat-candid inept way that they have in the last 6 months to a year.
I heard Tom English speak about it on Saturday on Sportsound, where if you look at this Celtic team, but then you bring back Alistair Johnson, Iheanacho, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Jota, that depends on their fitness, that's 4-2-3 new signings, then it goes from there. Craig, we've done...
But equally, Ray, if you look at it now, and you don't have Carter-Vickers, you don't have Alistair Johnson, and he's persevering with Anthony Ralston, that right centre-back thing. He's persevering with Yang as a right wing-back who does it with defensive bone in his body. And now they've got Motherwell away coming up, and they've got Rangers at home. So you just don't know how much damage you can do to themselves by that kind of dogged, slightly arrogant perseverance with a system that doesn't suit his players.
Yeah, I love it. I love it though, Craig, don't you?
Yeah, just on that as well. I think that's, Rangers and Celtic, you always have to compare and contrast them. I think that's something that Danny Rowell deserves a lot of credit for, coming in off the back of like Russell Martin's disastrous tenure, and just taking a look at the team of players that he's got to work with. The Rangers are a team that are in need of a lot of surgery. I'm sure there's some players that are earmarked to move out, and I think Danny Rowell was quite pragmatic about it. I think he understood that, well, these are the players we're stuck with until January. Let's just find a way to make it work. And although Rangers are not an exciting team, they're basically just like narrowly squeaking past their opposition. They're still doing it. They're racking up wins after wins after wins. And I think they're the most informed side in the division at the moment. So it shows that Danny Rowell's got that pragmatism, he's agile and he's robust in his approach. And if he's able to bring in the calibre players that suit the way he ideally wants to play, then I think that the rest of the sides in the division should be a bit worried about it. And I think with Kevin Thelwell, the sporting director, having moved on, I think it maybe consolidates a bit of power for him at Rangers as well. He's able to have more say in the kind of players that he wants to bring in. And I'm not necessarily sure that's the same at Celtic. So I do think Rangers have got the slight advantage in that regard.
Well, let's look at that, because we've looked at the top three. Let's look at the rest of the top six. So you've got Motherwell, Aberdeen and Hibs. Do we think that is likely to be the top six? Because Craig, let's run through them quickly. Motherwell, surprise package probably. When Jens Bertolascu was appointed, no one really knew what was going to happen. Hibs feels like they should be doing better than they are with the squad they have. And finally, how do you even sum up Aberdeen in 2025?
I was thinking about Aberdeen prior to this, and the only thing I could compare it to is Peep Show. And I was thinking of like Mark Corrigan, and just stick with me here. I was thinking of Mark Corrigan and Peep Show, who he spent so long like lusting after Sophie. I'd say that's like Aberdeen trying to get into Europe. But then when he finally got with Sophie, he realised that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, and he ultimately didn't like it. And I'd compare that to Aberdeen being in Europe there. And it feels like Europe is such a big distraction for a lot of the mid-ranking clubs in the Scottish Premiership. It's such a huge thing to get into Europe. But once you get there, I think it's really difficult for teams to balance the Thursday, Sunday of it. And Aberdeen have been no different to that. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they're able to cope as we go on into the second half of the season, when they can firmly concentrate on domestic matters. There's a couple of players there in the ranks who I really like the look of, like Alshish and Carlson. They're definitely really talented boys, but you can maybe see why they're playing at Aberdeen. Sometimes their decision making can let them down. They're perhaps a wee bit too individualistic for the team, but I do think they've got the capabilities of sticking around in the top six, certainly between now and the end of the season.
And for you, Stephen, Motherwell, Hibs, what do you make of them so far?
Motherwell have recruited really well. I mean, we're talking about Celtic and Rangers doing it badly. Well, Motherwell have used data through their head of analysis. I think it's Nick Dawson. They've recruited really well, and they've got a good formula, a good manager and good players. I think a big question for them, actually, it goes back to the Celtic thing as well, is I think Stephen Welsh has been huge for them in defence. And I think there is an option Celtic have to take him back. They've shown no sign of actually exercising that yet, but that would be interesting, because he could do that right centre-back thing for Celtic. So I think for Motherwell, the danger for teams like that is the reality that when you get a bit of attention, when you do well, can you hang on to those players? Because, they've taken players like Elijah Just, have taken Elliot Watt, who's been excellent. You look at Maswinise, and they've got really good players who are going to be attracting attention from elsewhere. So January's a different kind of test and a challenge for them. Hibs are the great enigma, aren't they? Because they had a terrible record against teams in the top six. But Saturday showed you what they're capable of when they put the different component parts together, even if they almost hibsed it in the last half hour. But for an hour, they were excellent. And they really showed what they're capable of if they can put it all together. It's just doing that on a consistent basis that gives them so many problems, I think.
Yeah, I was in Edinburgh on Saturday night, and the Hibs fans that I spoke to were so happy. So happy, because it felt like they've finally done it. Now to the bottom six and who's in trouble, right? This is an interesting one, because Craig, Stephen, you've got St Mirren, you've got a cup safely in the trophy cabinet. You don't expect the players will be thinking it's job done. It feels like Falkirk are probably safe. It feels like Dundee United are probably safe. And then sometimes you think maybe Falkirk aren't safe. I saw Craig, you raise your eyebrows when I said that. Will Stephen Presley still be in charge at at Dundee. Who's going to be the new Kilmarnock manager? Will Livy get a run of form? That's the bottom six. So, Craig, of those teams you mentioned, give us your thoughts on this.
I'll take Falkirk if I may, because I think Falkirk have probably, next to Motherwell and maybe Hearts, they've been the big surprise packages of the season so far. I think when Falkirk were promoted from the Championship, I think that a lot of people would have had them pegged to finish bottom of the table, even behind Livingston, given the fact that Livingston feel a bit more, or certainly gone into the season, felt a bit more battle-hardened and were able to stand up to the rigours of the Premiership. But on the whole, I think Falkirk have done really well. I mean, I bumped into Stephen McGinn, just as a wee anecdote, I bumped into Stephen McGinn at one of the Scotland games at Hampden, and it was not long after they'd drawn with Rangers. And he said that the Rangers result there, it kind of galvanised the belief within the coaches and the management and the players that they were doing things the right way. You know, that you can play this expansive, sort of like possession-based style of football as a sort of bottom six team, and it can yield successful results. Now, I know that their form lately hasn't been great, and goals especially have been really difficult to come by. But I think that Ross McKeever will be back from injury soon. Barney Stewart returns to the club after a pretty successful loan spell at Dunfermline Athletic. Certainly not the finished product by any means, but I think a player who's got the athleticism and physicality to stand up to the demands of the Premiership. And I think it's just a great story that so many players who were part of that invincible League One side are now holding their own in the top flight. It's great, and it just shows that it's just the stars all really aligned for Falkirk when they hired John McGlynn, and it took him a season to really get to grips with the club weren't in a good place when he took over, but now they are in a better place, and I think that guys like Jamie Swinney, the CEO, deserve a huge amount of credit for the journey that they've taken Falkirk, and I do think that they're an outside shout for the top six. I do think that. Okay,
Stephen, for you, when you look at that bottom six, Craig spoke extensively about Falkirk, Dundee United, Jim Goodwin, that huge result against Celtic, Stephen Presley across the city. The Dundee teams, what do you make of them so far if you were to give them a report card per se?
No real concerns about Dundee United. I think they'll be okay. You know, they have their ups and downs, but I think they'll always get enough results to be all right. Dundee, different matter. Huge win for them at the weekend there. It's funny, when I look at the bottom three, you can see, I mean, St Mirren's still got 2 games in hand. I can see those three being slightly cut adrift slightly. And you should be worried for Livingston, really worried for them, because I think it's the second weekend of the season that the last won a game. Only 9 points from 18 games. But then I look at the way they played against Celtic, and you look at the fact they've been competitive in most of these games. They've not really been hammered by anyone. And I just think with David Martindale, he'll find a way, the old street fighter will find a way to pull them through. I do, and I really worry for Kilmarnock the way things are now. They've got to get his managerial appointment right. They just look like a team with free fall, Kilmarnock.
Obviously, my beloved Chris Doolan is in there as interim manager, kept their first clean sheet since October. What's the chat, Stephen? Who they appointed? We've had different people in this podcast throw names in the hat. Have you heard anything? Are they close to anyone?
You know who? I don't. Listen, as I say, I've taken a few days off. I've not been following it closely. If it was up to me, and I know it would be a gamble, I'd be looking at Peter Leaving from Aberdeen. And I know he was linked with it. I know he declared an interest. He obviously he took caretaker status at Aberdeen, did a good job. He's got a Kilmarnock past. You know, he has extensive experience overseas. It would be a bit of a gamble, but I think it'd be a gamble well worth taking for them. Out with that, you know, I mean, if we've learned anything from Motherwell, it's that you know, taking a left field gamble from overseas doesn't have to backfire on you. So who knows what that board have up their sleeve? But then again, after the experience they had after the Steve Clark, our Italian friend, they may be a bit nervous about doing that. So for me personally, I would certainly be looking at somebody like Peter Leaving to come in and earn his spurs, and really he knows the league, he knows the club. I know they're all cliches, but I think they count for something.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think he was, when I looked, I think Bookie's favourite were Doolan and Naismith, Stephen Naismith, and then I think it was Peter Levine, Robbie Nielsen, those kind of players and managers mentioned. For you, Craig, we're talking about the bottom three there. If you had to put your money on it just now, who's going to go down?
Livingston and Kilmarnock to finish in 11th and 12th. I think they're quite interchangeable. I think that the only good thing Kilmarnock have got going for them is, like, Livingston have been slightly worse than them. I think that it's just been a nightmare of a season. I thought when Stuart Kettlewell got the job of replacing Derek McInnes, thought that seems like a sensible appointment, a safe pair of hands. Just did not work out at all, and they just have a real stink about them. And it just shows that what happens if you don't get your goalkeeper situation right. Now I know that Max Striek, his health, that's just a sort of something you can't really legislate for, but at least you've got to have a decent backup. And I think guys like Eddie Beach and Oluwayemi, they're not great. And I think if you don't have a decent goalkeeper, I think if you look at all the teams that have been relegated recently from the Scottish top flight, they've all had bad goalkeepers, and I think that's what might hold Kilmarnock back. And Livingston, I agree with Stephen's point. I really like David Martindale, and I really think that he might have something about him to basically pull them off the bottom of the table. But I just see like teams like Dundee and like Falkirk, if we want to put them into that mix, are just better than them.
Below the Premiership, what's going to surprise us? Right, let's keep this relatively quick fire. The Championship, the correct answer is Partick Thistle. Stephen, who's going to get promoted?
I just knew you were going to bring this round to Partick Thistle. I just knew you were. You've deliberately kept back a few minutes at the end to shoehorn in your own biased confirmation.
Stephen, as someone who did not get one of the 194 tickets to Queen's Park and took my 6-year-old son to stand on a hill where we could only see 75% of the pitch on Saturday, I feel I need to, because now if I talk about it enough, I might get a press ticket and get in the ground next time. That is the plan. So
that was a great goal scored at the weekend there, right from back to front.
Yep.
I think it was their own goal in the end, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
I really love it.
If my son asked, Aidan Fitzpatrick scored, because it's much easier than saying we did amazing stuff and we still couldn't score. But yes.
But it was a lovely, lovely goal. But no, listen, I mean, it's hard to... St Johnstone seemed to have steadied the ship a wee bit, you know. I mean, I don't know that Arbroath will necessarily be right in the mix or be in the playoffs, but I think they'll have a big say in who is. You know, they could have a big say in who actually does. Really interesting result for Dunfermline yesterday as well, who've been slightly underwhelming so far. So that was quite a statement for them. So you wouldn't entirely rule them out, but it's just always the most competitive league, isn't it? It's consistently the most interesting league in Scottish football, and it's that again, I think, you know, even right down to the plight of Ross County, because who saw that coming?
So my next question was going to be, what the hell has happened to Ross County? And Craig, I don't see them going down, do you?
Yes, I do actually. I do. I could see them getting like relegated via the playoffs. There's just a stink around the club, like just from top to bottom, like just all the way from the people running the club all the way down to the players. I had them pegged as favourites to win the division at the start of the campaign. I quite liked the business they were bringing in, especially when you compare it to St Johnstone's business. I thought that St Johnstone signing guys like Jack Baird and Morgan Boys and Regan Tumulty, I thought, they're not the kind of players that are going to take you into the Premiership. Whereas like Declan Gallagher and Jamie Lindsay and Ross Docherty, they're the kind of players that are. But it hasn't worked. I mean, the team have gone through, this will be on to their third manager once they find a replacement to Tony Docherty. They're not playing well. I think they've got the resources to turn the club around. You know, I think more so than any other team in that division, they can go out and spend money and pay players big wages to join the club. But it just doesn't feel that that's enough. It feels like they just need a cultural reset at the moment, and I don't know how you go about achieving something like that, but there's just a great big sucking void over Dingwall at the moment. So I would actually have them pegged to get relegated by Stennismuir in the playoffs.
Well, that's my next question. Are Steny going to make it to the Championship?
Yes, they are.
And I'm going to ask someone with a brain. Stephen, do you think they'll get to the Championship, Stenhousemuir?
Yeah, I can't see past Inverness.
Yes, go on.
There you go.
I can't see past Inverness for the automatic place.
And finally, I've got a question for you that I think I know the answer to this for both of you, but let's do it. Finally, what are you both most looking forward to in 2026? Stephen, football-wise, what are you most looking forward to in 2026?
Well, I'll be travelling down to London to try and get an iVisa sorted out for America in the middle of this month, frantically deleting my social media background posts before I walk in the door. And I mean, the World Cup is very difficult to ignore, isn't it? As I said earlier on in the podcast, I mean, it's a fascinating year. When you look at the Premiership, the imponderables there, but yeah, Scotland at the World Cup is going to be really quite something. I don't know that on the pitch it's going to be such a great experience. Off it is going to be epic, despite Infantino's efforts to make this the most rancid World Cup of all time. We just have to try and enjoy the experience, and it would just be nice to see Steve Clarke's team, once they know what they're doing, where they're going to be based, just go in there and doing themselves justice. I think that's all we ask, isn't it?
Yeah, Craig, you spent a lot of time with the Scotland squad in the last European campaign. We're not calling you a curse, but it's been implied. So what? I'm guessing you're buzzing for America.
Yeah, aye. The night against Denmark was the best game of football I've ever been to. One of the best nights of my life, and it's just I still go back like at least once a week and watch the highlights from that match. And anytime you feel down, just go and watch Kieran Tierney's goal, and it still brings back a lot of like amazing.
Do you still get something in your eye when you watch it, Craig? Do you still get?
Yeah, I do. I can still remember the game and just like all the energy having left my body, and could barely celebrate Kenny McLean's goal because it was just an absolute bit. So it's obviously Scotland at the World Cup is the number one. I imagine most people will feel like that. But I do think that if we want to stick to domestic matters, I do think the battle at the top of the Premiership is the most interesting thing. I think that outside of like Celtic and Rangers fans and probably Hibernian supporters, whether or not Hearts can go the distance, I hope they can, because it's just fascinating, and it's someone who doesn't have a horse in the race, just seeing something different. That is incredibly exciting, and I hope they can. I do like Hearts as a club. I think that what they've achieved so far this season has been incredible. It's just, as I mentioned earlier, just conditioned to think that no one else outside of Rangers and Celtic can do it. So hopefully that changes this season.
And between the two of you both spend a lot of time working in football. Stephen, give us one transfer you think could happen in the January transfer window. Who do you think is going to try sign who? Do you think one thing you could happen, do you think?
You've sprung that on me a bit. Crikey. I don't have the first idea. Okay, I'll give you one. I do think that the Ivorian winger, is it Bati or something his name is, the kid from Israel that Celtic were linked with, I think that's a very real possibility. I don't know if he'll be an absolute first choice signing, but I think he is one who they will definitely be looking to try and get in the door early doors.
And Craig, you see a lot of lower league football. One player any club should be looking at in Scottish football. Who's that one that stands out?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I have to pick. I'm going to go for. Might not necessarily set the heather on fire and end up playing for Scotland, but what about James Stokes at Edinburgh City? I think if you are looking for a pressing forward who will get you about 6 or 7 goals a season, he's your man. He will run himself into the ground for a team, and I think that most part-time teams would be looking at a player like that.
Well, that's all we've got time for. Many thanks to Craig and Stephen, and thank you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. 2025 was an incredible year. We got to a World Cup. We're headed that way. And just remember, your team could be signing, the best signing is a pressing forward that scores 6 or 7 goals a season. That is the kind of insights we give you. Thanks for listening. Enjoy your day.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.